today we are starting afresh, a new day. So a lot of good wishes and good feelings. Let's make a mark in the field of liberal arts, social sciences. So Director Liberal Arts will be joining us very soon. Dr. Parul, Rahul Tripathi ji will be joining us. Yeah. So it's in core, if you see, the entire conference is multidisciplinary, thereby connecting you with multiple fields, be it history, our own history, or the history of other who are not actually the other. They're human beings like us. They have their own culture, history, heritage. This is a particular conference which is going to celebrate all these cultures together, connecting us with the world culture, world literature. So several of the papers I found, they are actually, written in this view. Some of them are translations of Spanish, French, Francophone literature, Japanese literature. So English is a language which can actually connect all the people of the world because many speak this language, right? Even if you go to Europe, there are people who know. I mean, most of them today know English. So that way, the conference should be having a success. And without you, we cannot do. So be there, be attentive to all the talks. Our first lecture will be by Jonathan Lockhart. Sir is a renowned poet, writer, literary critic. So we are all eager to hear Sir. Sir has joined. So over to Dr. Gunja. And I think I will be doing a bad work if I do not talk about Professor Chandalia, who is with us, Hemendra Chandalia. He has been associated with us for quite a long time. And he is the expert board of studies for English in Amity School of Languages. And along with him, we have Madam Pramila Singhvi ji, who is also an educationist. Her field of study is history. So you can see it is extremely relevant to have these luminaries with us. And the conference is connecting many of these good researchers, scholars with Amity University, Rajasthan, and all the participants, they are contributing to the success of the conference. With that, I hand it over to Dr. Gunja Patni. She's doing a great work. You must have seen her talking, appreciating very nicely. Entire thing is done. All the people who are there, they are a part of this conference. And you become all Amitians. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deepa ma'am. So once again, a very good morning to all of you. And I hope yesterday was a great day, a great learning experience to all of us. And today again, we are all set to go for another day filled with great speakers, esteemed guests, and participants. So I'm extremely thankful to the panelists who are sitting here on the dais, and I would like to welcome them all. I would like to extend a heartfelt welcome to Professor Hemendra Chandalia, who was the Dean Humanities and is working at Rajasthan Vidyapeeth, Udaipur. We welcome you, sir. I would appreciate if you can offer a round of applause. I also welcome Professor Pramila Singhvi, retired professor from Sukhadia University. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your presence here. We have with us, and it is a privilege to welcome Professor and Head, ASLA, Amity School of Liberal Arts, Professor Rahul Tripathi. Thank you, sir, for blessing us. And cannot forget the name, Professor Deepa Chakravarti is our backbone behind this conference. I heartily welcome them all. And cannot afford to miss one esteemed guest and a distinguished personality who has joined us from Canada, Professor Jonathan Lockhart. Sir, can you hear me? Sir, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Okay. A very warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you.
I would like to start this morning with some beautiful lines by Jonathan, sir. The poem is titled as An Ode in Hunan. You walk up the lake, up the mountain, the monks long gone, the monastery in ruins, the land wet, the rise deep, the laughter of your childhood, the scatter of crows, the dust on your feet is thick, cakes in the sun, your eyes dark as a pool, your hair in the wind, the salt on your lips. You always go quiet when your pulse is up, your words coming and going, fading in and out, where below your family comes and goes, the trees bending, the unsaid prayers, stacking up pagodas under a sharp blue sky, and in the distance, small figures cluster, as if vihara in the rock cliffs, and beyond your shoulders, a mirag of stupa, and our eyes, tongues, fingers, feet seem to pass, the one, the other, and what we say and taste is and is not. What a lovely poem, what a lovely composition sir has created for readers like us.
Well, thank you very much for the lovely reading.
Thank you, sir. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker of the day, Professor Jonathan Lockhart. Sir is a chair professor, School of Translation, Shandong University, Toronto. Sir is a poet, historian, and literary scholar who studied at Toronto and Cambridge and has taught literary theory, intellectual and cultural history, and creative writing in Canada, France, China, the United Kingdom, and the United States. As a poet, Sir has collaborated with artists to create artist books and exhibitions. Some of his works include Unforgetting Private Charles Smith, The Burning Lake, Musing, Dream Work, Dream Salvage, and the list is endless, limitless. What I want to show here is that Sir has created for readers like us a notch, a complete pool, which is full of artistic values and humanitarian values. So we are extremely privileged to host you today, sir. We heartily welcome you to the two-day international conference on revisiting history, ethnicity, and myth and literature. So without any further formality, I would request, sir, to please address your keynote to the audience here. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. And I wanted to thank the organizers for inviting me, and thank you for your lovely introduction, and to all the audience who've come and the panelists. It's a great privilege to be with you. And I think the discussion of history, ethnicity, and mythology are very important.
Welcome, Professor Jonathan.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. So
Good.
just wondering if things are fine, connectivity and all. Now there
Yes,
is no problem. So
can you hear me?
yes, very good. So please continue.
Okay.
Please continue.
Oh no, well, thank you so much for the invitation. That's very kind of you. Yeah, and so I just wanted to praise you for the conference. That's very important to do work in humanities, arts, and social sciences. And the title is more about history, ethnicity, and mythology. And I have a PowerPoint to share with you. So should I share my PowerPoint?
Yes, please, sir.
Okay, let me try to do that. I'm not the best at technology, which let's see, how do I share screen? Is that for PowerPoint?
Yes, sir, you may share your screen.
Sir, you can see a green button, share screen button.
Yeah, so I just put share for
sir.
PowerPoint,
Yes, sir.
and then I do this, and then I share. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Correctly fine.
Is that okay? Can
Yes,
everybody
sir.
see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Clearly
terrific.
visible, sir.
Thank you so much for your technical help. I just want to make sure. So I wanted to say I'm happy to have questions, and I'll try to do this, not take the whole time. How much time do we have? Because I know we started a bit later than we thought.
Sir, we may have a 40 minutes long session.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
good. Okay. So I was told an hour, but 40 minutes, and I'll try to make it faster so that we can have some questions. All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. So I want to praise you for this wonderful conference. I know how much work it is for all of you to organize it and for everybody to come together. And so I know we had some technical difficulties, but it's only because I'm concerned to make sure that I arrive and I do the work I'm supposed to do. So that's the reason I always check to see if everything's working. So I'm going to concentrate more on mythology, not so much on history and on ethnicity, or what I call identity. I've written about these things many times before, but it's on mythology that I want to talk about. And I want to talk about somebody who is, I think, one of the most important writers in English, and that's George Orwell. And more particularly, I'm going to focus on one of his essays, and I'll tell the students that I had an interview to Oxford when I was 21, and one of the things I spoke about was this essay. So I'm going back a long way in time for the Oxford interview to talk about George Orwell again. Somebody I thought when I was a student who's very important, and I still think he's very important. So the title's George Orwell and Language Against Lies. And Orwell says, but if thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. And here's the first, one of the first published editions of Orwell. And this was created for a group of collectors for Christmas, and is published in 1947. And here's the first page. And so it was published in Horizon in London, and then the New Republic. Now, Orwell says, political language is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable, and to give an appearance of solidity to pure wind. So here's a Western or English writer who's criticizing his own culture and his own politics. And so I think he's a very important figure. I call this kind of alternative thinking or opposition from within. The myth-making of literature uses a poetic and figurative language, and Orwell, a novelist and literary figure, also discusses politics that has implications for his world and ours in the typology between now and then, between the literary and the non-literary. Literature is a displaced myth-making and can be a symbolic representation of history in the world, or a possible and fictional world that might be mimetic, anti-mimetic, or something in between. So it imitates and it does not imitate the world. Essays are also literary, but Orwell's renowned essay is about non-literary language. I'm having trouble making sure that I see my own screen here. Let me just see here if I can move this over here. Good. All right. So Orwell has a view of plain, sincere, and truthful language. It has more to do with politics than a political novel, or an allegory, as in his Animal Farm, 1945, or his political novel or future fiction, with the typology of past, present, and future. And that is the also famous novel, 1984. The essay I'm discussing appeared between these two novels. Language might be part of a resistance to propaganda. So what Orwell's really saying is language can be in the service of truth and freedom and dignity. And that, in some ways, is what art and humanities and social sciences, at their best, are working for all human beings. A careful use of words, as Orwell discusses in Politics and the English Language, 1946, makes us into better readers, writers, interpreters, and citizens. Sorry, there we go. I'd like to revisit Orwell's essay to see how one can use language in a true way and not for the mist of mythology or the ether of ideology, dressing up words that lie as if they were the very truth. Orwell opens his essay. Most people who bother with the matter at all would admit that the English language is in a bad way, but it is generally assumed that we cannot, by conscious action, do anything about it. Our civilization is decadent, and our language, so the argument runs, must inevitably share in the general collapse. It follows that any struggle against the abuse of language is a sentimental archaism, like preferring candles to electric light or hansom cabs to airplanes. Underneath this lies the half-conscious belief that language is a natural growth and not an instrument which we shape for our own purposes. And Orwell continues, now it is clear that the decline of a language must ultimately have political and economic causes. It is not due simply to the bad influence of this or that individual writer, but an effect can become a cause, reinforcing the original cause and producing the same effect in an intensified form, and so on indefinitely. Orwell continues by arguing that the English language becomes ugly and inaccurate because our thoughts are foolish, but the slovenliness of our language makes it easier for us to have foolish thoughts. The point is that the process is reversible. He argues that we can, by taking the trouble, avoid the bad habits of modern English in speaking, but particularly in writing. Orwell reasons, if one gets rid of these habits, one can think more clearly, and to think clearly, it is a necessary step toward political regeneration, so that the fight against bad English is not frivolous and is not the exclusive concern of professional writers. Good, clear language helps us to discern the lies we tell others and that others tell us. For Orwell, politics is all about lying. Obviously, this is not a popular view among politicians in England in his day, or perhaps since. Orwell reads 5 passages of bad English, and I might tell you that he takes some professors and literature professors and uses them for some of the examples of bad writing. And Orwell's quite modest because he knows he can write badly too if he's not careful. So he doesn't put himself above the challenges. He draws conclusions from that reading. His own concrete prose guards against dull, fuzzy abstraction. Orwell is all for the concrete, the direct, the basic. He's not for fuzzy abstractions. And he says, each of these passages has faults of its own, but quite apart from avoidable ugliness, 2 qualities are common to all of them. The first is staleness of imagery. The other is lack of precision. The writer either has a meaning and cannot express it, or he inadvertently says something else, or he is almost indifferent as to whether his words mean anything or not. This mixture of vague and sheer incompetence is the most marked characteristic of modern English prose, and especially of any kind of political writing. As soon as certain topics are raised, the concrete melts into the abstract, and no one seems to be able to think of terms of speech that are not hackneyed. Prose consists less and less of words chosen for the sake of their meaning, and more of phrases tacked together like the sections of a prefabricated henhouse. In a clear, concrete style, Orwell warns us not to turn our prose and thought into a ready-made henhouse. We should not build our prose of stale images or do so imprecisely. The abstract melts the concrete like a rain of platitudes over and over. Orwell lists the tricks of prefabricated prose, dying metaphors, operators or false verbal limbs, what he means by prefabricated phrases, pretentious diction or vocabulary, meaningless words. Lest we think that Orwell is not talking about those of us who work in literary criticism, he explicitly mentions us and our errant prose. In certain kinds of writing, particularly in art criticism and literary criticism, it is normal to come across long passages which are almost completely lacking in meaning. Orwell makes us uncomfortable in our pretensions, our clouding of the way. Literature explores meaning, but literary criticism can obscure it. The one is a story, or mythos, myth in ancient Greek. That means the other covers over myth with a meaningless gauze of words. It is a kind of abstraction of the concrete words of literature. So in other words, literary criticism can take literature and turn it into something obscure, when literature should be seeking out truth about human nature and other related topics. I extrapolate this from Orwell's words about the long stretches without meaning in literary criticism. Literary criticism is then for Orwell like political language and uses terms that have lost their meaning or have none. Political words like democracy can be abused. Orwell elaborates, it is almost universally felt that when we call a country democratic, we are praising it. Consequently, the defenders of every kind of regime claim that it is a democracy and fear that they might have to stop using the word if it were tied down to any one meaning. Words of this kind are often used in an unconsciously dishonest way. In this amplification, Orwell also refers memorably to this catalog of swindles and perversions. He switches from real examples to an imaginary one, quoting a passage from the Bible and then translating it into modern English. Here's a well-known verse from Ecclesiastes. I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill, but time and chance happeneth to them all. Here it is in modern English. This is Orwell's modern English translation from the concrete words of the Bible to that I just read to what modern English would do with this. Objective considerations of contemporary phenomena compels the conclusion that success or failure in competitive activities exhibits no tendency to be commensurate with innate capacity, but that a considerable element of the unpredictable must invariably be taken into account. And Orwell comments, this is a parody, but not a very gross one. Orwell's analysis of the original in his translation stresses how modern prose is moving away from the concrete to the abstract, from economy to wordiness, from vivid images to vague generalities. Orwell speaks to the reader, saying that he and the reader would, if asked to write on how uncertain is fortune for humans, write something more like his translation than the original in Ecclesiastes. If this bad prose and politics is a danger to Orwell, it is an especial danger for the rest of us. He translates the concrete poetry of this passage in the Bible into the abstract now speak, as I call it. Style is not something extraneous, Orwell says. It is central to being, meaning, politics. He amplifies. As I have tried to show, modern writing at its worst does not consist in picking out words for the sake of their meaning and inventing images in order to make the meaning clearer. It consists in gumming together long strips of words which have already been set in order by someone else and making the results presentable by sheer humbug. The attraction of this way of writing is that it is easy. So what Orwell's telling us is the facile, the easy is not the best way forward. These ready-made phrases I used to come across, I'm talking now, in works of theory, especially those coming to it for the first time or wanting to belong to a school or a new wave, a danger for all of us in literary criticism and theory, perhaps indeed in all of humanities and social sciences. It is an easy way to sound deep. It makes the obvious sound complicated. This becomes a stitching together of pre-existing phrases into a patchwork. Composition has implications for meaning and politics. Orwell gives a concrete example before generalizing. The attraction of this way of writing is that it's easy. It is easier, even quicker, once you have the habit. To say, in my opinion, it is not an unjustifiable assumption than to say, I think. If you use ready-made phrases, you not only don't have to hunt about for words, you also don't have to bother with the rhythms of your sentences, since these phrases are generally so arranged as to be more or less euphonious. When you are composing in a hurry, when you are dictating to a stenographer, for instance, or making a public speech, it is natural to fall into a pretentious Latinized style. Such language hides meaning even from the writer. This kind of language obscures truth. This is a serious matter. Writing and reading are political acts. Orwell is teaching, writing, and reading. We see a great writer and reader at work. Orwell did not find literary criticism to be good writing, and the same is true for political writing. In our time, it is broadly true that political writing is bad writing. Where it is not true, it will generally be found that the writer is some kind of rebel expressing his private opinions and not a party line. Orthodoxy, of whatever color, seems to demand a lifeless, imitative style. He's talking about Britain in the 1940s. The writer, reader, citizen need to think for themselves and to take the greatest care with language. There are implications when people opt for the ready-made phrases that come with thoughtlessness, conscious and unconscious. And this reduced state of consciousness, if not indispensable, is at any rate favorable to political conformity. He's arguing against being a conformist in politics and other things. Orwell's clear and direct languages faces the question square on. He criticizes British, European, and American politics. In our time, political speech and writing are largely the defense of the indefensible. Things like the continuance of British rule in India, the Russian purges and deportations, the dropping of the atom bombs on Japan can indeed be defended, but only by arguments which are too brutal for most people to face and which do not square with the professed aims of political parties. Thus, political language has to consist largely of euphemism, question begging, and sheer cloudy vagueness. You'll notice that he's criticizing Britain for its rule in India, the Russians for purging people and deporting people, and the Americans for dropping atomic bombs on Japan. So he's a great writer. We love him as a writer, but obviously there would be people whose feathers he'd be ruffling. Language should be used as Orwell uses it to seek the truth at home, no matter how uncomfortable it is. Orwell is showing how writers and readers can resist language that is insincere, obscure, and untruthful. Orwell's language is analytical and stark. Consider, for instance, some uncomfortable English professor defending Russian totalitarianism. He cannot say outright, I believe in killing off your opponents when you can get good results by doing so. Probably, therefore, he will say something like this: while freely conceding that the Soviet regime exhibits certain features which the humanitarian may be inclined to deplore, we must, I think, agree with a certain curtailment of the right to political opposition is an unavoidable concomitant of transitional periods, and that the rigors which the Russian people have been called upon to undergo have been amply justified in the sphere of concrete achievement. So he criticizes Britain, Russia, and the United States, all based on sort of originally European ways of thinking. And he's quite direct in his criticism. And he's mainly looking at the English language. So the main places he's criticizing are really within the British Isles, but can also, of course, be extended to anybody who speaks English. The inflated style is itself a kind of euphemism. A mass of Latin words falls upon the facts like soft snow, blurring the outlines and covering up all the details. The great enemy of clear language is insincerity. When there is a gap between one's real and one's declared aims, one turns, as it were, instinctively to long words and exhausted idioms like a cuttlefish squirting out ink. Here Orwell shows in his translation of the concise and direct statement of an indefensible defense of this totalitarianism, the wordy, woolly statement that glosses over the brutality of executing political opponents. The images of snow and the cuttlefish embody the concreteness that Orwell recommends. The imagery with its metaphors is memorable and beautiful. The main focus of Orwell's essay is the politics of the English language, and he sees how pervasive and corrupt politics are. All issues are political issues, and when politics itself is a mass of lies, evasions, folly, hatred, and schizophrenia, when the general atmosphere is bad, language must suffer. This is a grim picture of politics. And this is a warning that he is sending. Orwell does not exempt himself from the trials of writing. But if thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. A bad usage can be spread by tradition and imitation, even among people who should and do know better. The debased language that I have been discussing is in some ways very convenient. He elaborates on how difficult it is to write sincerely and have a politics of sincerity. Okay, I just have a few more minutes. It is easy to be lazy and go with the comfortable and the convenient. Orwell calls attention to the challenge even in his own prose and essay. Look back through this essay, and for certain you will find that I have again and again committed the very faults I am protesting against. Orwell's critique of the relation between language and politics is also ironic because he sees criticism as applying to his own words. He tries to build trust with the reader as someone who writes sincerely and honestly, even if he does not always achieve the kind of language that he recommends. That is Orwell. Nor is Orwell fatalistic about language. He sees some hope despite detailing the lies of politics. I said earlier that the decadence of our language is probably curable. Those who deny this would argue, if they produced an argument at all, that language merely reflects existing social conditions and that we cannot influence its development by any direct tinkering with words and constructions. So far as the general tone or spirit of a language goes, this may be true, but it is not true in detail. He sees social conditions as affecting the spirit, but not the details of the language. He also elaborates on what the defense of English language is and is not, and I will concentrate on what Orwell thinks it is. What is above all needed is to let the meaning choose the word and not the other way about. In prose, the worst thing one can do with words is surrender to them. After exploring what the defense means and not, Orwell says, this is part of his discussion. I think the following rules will cover most cases. Never use a metaphor, simile, or other figure of speech which you are used to seeing in print. Never use a long word when a short one will do. If it is possible to cut a word out, always cut it out. Never use the passive where you can use the active. Never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or a jargon word if you can think of an everyday English equivalent. Break any of these rules sooner than say anything outright barbarous. Orwell calls attention to what language he is speaking and is not discussing. I have not here been considering the literary use of language, but merely language as an instrument for expressing and not for concealing or preventing thought. As with analytical philosophers like Whitehead, Russell, and Wittgenstein, Orwell does not address literary language, the words of that myth-making that is literature, that connotative, allegorical, figurative use of language that does not stop at the denotative. Literature does more than declare. Still, Orwell does something that has a practical effect on reading and writing in words that are not in literature. If you simplify your English, you are freed from the worst follies of orthodoxy. Such reading and writing help the reading and writing of literature by comparison and contrast. Conclusion. A stupid statement can always be seen as stupid when you write clearly and simply. Political language, Orwell says, is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable, and to give an appearance of solidity to pure wind. He sees the process as being gradual and maintains that a person can change his or her own habits and can put useless phrases into the dustbin. This is how Orwell ends his essay, which has implications for politics and history. Orwell is a literary figure, but also a social critic, and focuses all this through his knowledge of language and his craft as a maker, what was among the Greeks called a poet. History is the events about the past and a story about the past. But Orwell, here at least, leaves the myth-making of literature and literary language aside. This is a conclusion that is also a beginning, but owing to time, I'll have to leave that for another time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We are endlessly thankful to you and really privileged to have witnessed such a beautiful and captivating presentation. Our keynote speaker has masterfully woven together history, myth, literature, language, linguistic, and the other beauties of literature together, which has not only educated us, but really has inspired us to be truthful Exactly, to be truthful. So it is a testimony of Sir's deep and profound knowledge, of course, that inspires people like us to learn more and to do more in this particular field. So we are really thankful to you, sir, for such comprehensive and such wonderful presentation. I hope we all have learned something today about George Orwell, a literary figure whose name starts coming in our books and pages since very early age, right from class 7th or 8th, if I'm not wrong. Isn't it? We have read his works very often. So thank you so much, sir, for such beautiful deliberations you have put forward today.
Thanks very much.
I would now request Professor Deepa Chakravarti to please say a few words.
I have but words of appreciation for Jonathan Lockhart, Professor Jonathan Lockhart. And the relevance of the delivery is extremely big to this day, particularly in a period where we are living. So language being used for the service of one's own interest, be it political, be it, public speaking, how much truthful we are. Are we talking from our heart, or are we embellishing language just to, solve our own interest and petty needs? So, sir, I think your deliberation has really put things in its proper way, that whatever we are doing, are we conscious, or are we just writing, using foreign expressions, using passive where active is required? I'm just quoting, sir. And then trying to show we have a lot of knowledge, but actually we are hollow in our heart. That is the point. We should not be like that. We should be good humans. So all the youngsters who are sitting here, all the participants who have come from various corners of India, so you had the opportunity to listen to this, and I think you can try to follow it in spirit if possible. So language is not for, impressing people, but language is to speak from your heart and should be used in that direction. Thank you, Professor Jonathan. And he is also our adjunct professor. We are very closely connected, and many our work is been done by sir. So I just want to request sir to stay connected with us. Sir will be again coming for the valedictory session as a chief guest. But at that time, we'll have around 10 minutes time. And also my excuses because we couldn't start at 9:30. I know it's very late. It will be 11 p.m. there, Jonathan?
That's right.
Yes. So take rest, but your message has set the tune for today's conference. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'll be getting up at 3:30 in the morning to join you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, there are some questions from the audience.
Oh, yes, of course.
Keynote should not have been.
It is not a question, just an inquiry. If, sir, just an observation, if somebody could share with you. So,
Of course, yes, of course.
okay, sir. Sir, I will just, no, you can just take the mic.
Yeah, I am Dr. M. Shanti from Goa, India. I just wanted to say that as English teachers or English learners, we normally do that. We know Animal Farm, we know George Orwell's 1984. apart from these two, we don't know him much as an essayist, because especially this politics and English language, this essay, it is really the way you highlighted it. It was something amazing, because as teachers of creative writing, this essay we are supposed to read before we teach. And all the creative writers, the tips what George Orwell has given is something worth. One should see that thoughts will corrupt the language, and we should take care of language, how to use the language in a proper way. Thank you, Professor Jonathan Hart. It was something worth, and I really enjoyed your lecture. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you very
so
much.
much, Dr. Shanti. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much again for your valuable time.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure. And thank you for reading the poem. It was very kind of you.
Thank you so much, sir. Namaskar.
We'll see you soon, right? Bye-bye.
Yes. Bye-bye, sir. So, dear audience, we have another plenary talk by Dr. Sinui Geraldine, who will be joining us from Cameroon. I will just ensure that she has joined us.
From Canada to Africa now.
We are moving from one part of
That is the beauty
globe
of
to the
culture.
other. Oh yes, Sunny ma'am is here with us. Hello, can you hear me, ma'am?
Hello,
Yeah, hello, ma'am. Namaskar.
good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Camera.
Thank you.
Your camera is turned off, ma'am. Could you please on it? Yeah, now you're visible. Thank you so much. So, dear audience, we have another guest today, another speaker today, Dr. Sinui Geraldine from Cameroon. A hearty welcome to you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Audience, I would just like to brief about ma'am's achievements and her contributions to literature. Madam Sinui Geraldine is a seasoned and enthusiastic scholar in Commonwealth literature as well as post-colonial literature, who has researched and published many academic papers at both national and international levels. She currently teaches English language and literature in English at Government Bilingual High School downtown Bamenda. She also coordinates the school's journalism and creative writing club, where she mentors young students and encourages them in creative writing and journalism. Part of Dr. Sinui's passion is creativity. She has published her short stories and poems in many online platforms. In April 2023, she launched the second edition of her book, Music in the Wood and Other Folktales. She is a contributing poet of an international poetry anthology, Love Letters to Water. Dr. Sinui was nominated as 2023 International Human Rights Arts Fellow, and she is working in her home country. So besides this, she is also a book reviewer editor at World City Journal and has been conferred with many awards, of which featured storyteller on World Pulse Story Award, May 2017 is the highest. So finally, I would like to tell about ma'am that ma'am believes in giving back to the community what she has received from it. And she does humanitarian services, sponsors some destitute persons in school, helps the poor and needy in her community, and volunteers at the Garden for Education and Healing Orphanage, Bamenda, Cameroon. Owing to her passion to save the planet and humanity, in February 2023, she co-founded a common initiative group called Rising for Girls, Organic Farms and Products. We are extremely grateful that you accepted our invitation to join us here in the two-day international conference, madam. We welcome you once again to this platform. And I hope this is going to be a wonderful learning experience for all of us. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. My paper, as you already saw on the program, is Myth and Colonial History in Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Myths, as seen through this paper, are beliefs shared by a particular group of people in a particular society. Myths explain things that will otherwise remain understandable by human beings. And for this reason, Amala, 117 page, defines myths as they are bound by patterns of depth of expressions of reality. As for colonial history is a history that deals with in the history of intrusion, destruction, and the dismantling and unsettling of societies of the colonized by the colonizer. Even though the colonial masters did not penetrate the African interior without resistance, they themselves used force and violence and eventually defeated most of the indigenous people, as will be portrayed in Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Myths are those things that hold a society together, because some of the myths explain things in creation that children may ask something like rainfall, why certain animals behave the way they do, and institutions, laws that govern the society. But from what this paper shows, from the moment the white man steps in, they unsettle the society, destroy some of the myths, defy them, and the society falls apart. The first myth that we come about is that which says that in Nigeria, the novel is set in Nigeria, you do not ask for someone who owes you money in the morning. That is a myth that tries to govern the society. And this myth is brought out through the flashback when Okonkwo, the protagonist in this novel, remembers his late father, Onoka. Okonkwo's father was a debtor, and he borrowed money from several people. And one morning, one of the people that he owes comes in to ask for his money. And Okonkwo tells him that he owes several people huge amounts of money, but none of them has come to ask him for money in the morning. Africans in many countries in Africa, it is believed that if someone owes you, you don't come to ask for that money in the morning, because if you do, it will be like you are bewitching that particular person. You are wishing that person ill luck. Therefore, that myth is instituted in order to control the way people behave in society, and it is a kind of morality myth. And the second myth that we come across is a myth about the tortoise. That's a creation myth. The tortoise and the birds, they had a meeting in heaven, and the tortoise didn't know what to do because he got no wings to fly. And then all the birds contribute wings and lend the tortoise. But when they get to heaven, he takes over the name, all of you, such that everything that is served at the party in heaven is owned by the tortoise, because when they bring everything, they will say, it is for all of you. And then the tortoise will turn and tell his friends, you see, this thing is for me. It is for all of you. Therefore, it belongs to me. So the birds become very angry. At the end of the party, all the birds, one after another, take their wings, their feathers, and tortoise remains without wings to fly back to the earth. And then he sends one of the messengers who takes the message to his wife on earth. says, bring out all the mattresses, all the cushions, all the clothes, and put in the yard so that I can fall on. But the bird tells Tortoise's wife the contrary. Bring out all the sharp instruments, the machetes, the swords, the knives. So she puts them in the yard, and then Tortoise falls and breaks into pieces. And the wife of Tortoise picks him to the medicine man who stitches his skin. And that is a myth of creation, which explains why the tortoise skin is patched. And now another myth of creation, trying to explain why the mosquito is always coming to the ears, is that the mosquito wanted to marry somebody. And the lady said, no, mosquito, you're too small. Soon you will die. When are you going to die? And the mosquito becomes very angry. And each time the mosquito meets the human being, it comes to remind the human being that he is still alive. So that myth is a creation myth that explains why the mosquito is always coming to a human being. Yeah, it is to remind the human being that he is still alive. And then other myths that control the society are the myth of not whistling at night. Okonkwo remembers that his mother told him that at night, children do not whistle at night, because if you whistle at night, the spirits will capture your voice and use it for evil purposes. Also, there are some dangerous animals that are not called by their names at night. For example, a snake is called a string. And the myth about the string is a metaphor for the snake, because if you call a dangerous animal at night by its name, it's going to harm you. So they just call it metaphorically a string. And then there is a myth about the week of peace. In this novel, Umofia village is a community, a primordial community where people are farmers. And prior to the week of planting, prior to the planting season, the people in Umofia village observe the week of peace. And during this week of peace, no one is allowed to die. If you die in Umofia village in Nigeria, it's going to be considered as an abomination, as defiling the earth. And such people who die during the week of peace are considered as an abomination, and they are taken and discarded. They aren't buried in the earth, because such death during the week of peace, when they are observing peace to appease the gods of production, the gods of fertility, is an abomination. So they carry these people and through in what they call the evil forest. It's some kind of a fetish forest. It is somehow sacred, even though its sacredness is contrary to the sacredness with the gods, because no one is allowed to enter this evil forest. Everybody that defies the laws of the land and dies, anyone who hangs himself, is discarded in this evil forest. And there is also another myth about the Obanjes, that people, children who they have double spirits, when they are born, they die soon afterwards. Maybe before they reach 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, they die. And when these children die, they are born again. That's why they call them Obanjes within the Nigerian society. A child that is born and comes back to be born again, he dies and comes back to the mother's womb in order to torment the mother's life, the parent's life. So every Obanje is when a child is born and they suspect that it's an Obanje, according to the myth in this society, they give a mark to that child so that if he or she is born again after death, they will know it and they will bring the medicine man to try to play some charms so that this child will not die, or that if he dies, he or she dies, he will not come back again. And then there is a myth of twins. Historically, twins were not accepted in the Nigerian society. They were considered as an abomination to humanity because they didn't know how one woman would give birth to 2 children at a time. And the twins were often carried and put in a traditional clay pot and discarded in the evil forest. So these are myths that govern the primordial society before the coming of the white man. So apart from the intertribal wars, which are staged from time to time in the novel, the 9 villages beyond and beyond Umuofia live together and intermarry. However, from the moment the first white man sets his foot on the land, things start taking a negative turn. The society is torn apart and family members are turned against each other. Things change very rapidly from the moment Okonkwo goes on exile in part 2 of the novel. His friend Obiakere has come to visit him in his mother's clan where Okonkwo has come into exile and has so much news about Umuofia. He tells Okonkwo that the village of Abame is no more. It has been wiped out from the surface of the earth by the white man. And the white people who first come into this country, into this village, are missionaries. And they said the first white man comes in with an iron horse. That is a car. For the people saw the white man for the first time. And these are colonial masters in the guise of missionaries. And when these missionaries stay here, they start converting people into Christianity. And we are told that one of the villages around Umuofia have been wiped out by the white man. When this first white man comes, the oracle predicts that these people are going to bring trouble to the land of Umuofia. And then they get the white man, kills him, and ties his iron horse, which is a car. They saw the car for the first time, they tie it to the tree. But before they could know, these people of Abame didn't know that the white people had already settled in a neighboring village and set up their camps, their churches, their administration, their business centers, and their prisons. So they send their soldiers and they come and erase the whole village of Abame. And eventually they enter every other village and convert. One of the people who are converted into Christianity is Okonkwo's son, Nwonye, who becomes a rival of his father who doesn't want to comply to the missionaries. He does not want to accept the white man's religion. And satirically, the writer juxtaposes the activities of the white missionaries as Christians with the cunning threats they introduced through the government. They have also brought to Umuofia. The narrator notes that apart from the church, the white men have also brought a government. They have built a court where the district commissioner judges cases in ignorance. The white people set up their courts and they care less about the customs and traditions of these people. And another important thing to note about is that the evil forest is held sacred within the amongst the people. But when the white people come, they ask for a place to construct a church together with some of the indigenous people that they have converted. Some of the indigenous people abandoned their African traditional religions and followed the white man's religion. And then the white men also defied the caste system, the Oso system, because within the Nigerian primordial society, there was class. There were some classes of people that were regarded as the caste, like you have the caste system in India. These people are regarded as slaves, and they can never join the upper class or the middle class people. They are the lowest of the low. They cannot be accepted amongst the great of the land. But when the white man comes, he accepts the Osus in Christianity, and they join the rest of the people in the churches, thereby dismantling the myth of the Osu, this caste system. And another point to note is that families are torn apart by this the arrival of the white man and the introduction of Christianity. The villagers become divided because some of the people who follow the white men become traitors. They betray their brothers and sisters. Like Okonkwo, when Okonkwo kills one of the soldiers of the white men, and they call these soldiers the Kotma, the white men go after Okonkwo, and during the village gathering, because they are planning to wage a war against the activities of the white people in the Umofia village, Okonkwo gets angry, shoots one of the soldiers of the white men. This soldier is not a white man, but a convict that has been recruited into the army of the white man. Okonkwo shoots one, and then thinking that his people will support him, because these are people who have come to tear their society apart, their community apart. Much to his surprise, Okonkwo notices that the people do not approve of his action of killing the white man's soldier. And because of this, Okonkwo gets angry, detaches himself from the crowd, gets to his home, and hangs himself. When Okonkwo hangs himself, the white people, the white man and his followers come to arrest Okonkwo, but unfortunately, Obiakere, Okonkwo's friend, tells him that it is forbidden for Umofia village to bring down the corpse of someone who has committed suicide from a tree. And therefore, the white man, the white commissioner, instructs his subjects to bring down the corpse of Okonkwo, and Okonkwo's corpse, like that of his father, is dragged to the evil forest and abandoned there. Even though Okonkwo, in part 1 of the novel, was the hero of the village, he ends up being rejected by his own people. And the activities of the white people as represented in Things Fall Apart is a recapitulation, is a replica of the activities of the colonial masters in Africa and the rest of the world. Colonial masters, first of all, or the imperialists, used religion as a means to get to the territories in Africa and other parts of the world in order to penetrate the indigenous people before they introduce their conquest, their eventual conquest. If we read Ngugi wa Thiong'o's East African novel, I Will Marry When I Want, we will see that same phenomenon. And the same way that they came and converted indigenous people who will facilitate their colonial activities within the communities of the indigenous people. They converted. If you look at Kiowa Kanoru in Ngugi wa Thiong'o's Things, I'll Marry When I Want, he becomes a watchdog of the colonial master in the name of Christianity. And even after the white people have left, he continues that particular subjugation of his people, deceiving his people, taking their lands to sell a piece of land in order to get wedded in the Christian way, in the white man's church, as this befalls Kikunda and his wife, Wangesi. The same phenomenon is represented in a Cameroonian novel, The White Man of God, written by Kenjo Jumbam. They always, first of all, sent the missionaries. The missionaries mass themselves. They come, they introduce the religion and tell the Africans that their own religion is heathen, as it happens in things fall apart, that their own cultural religion, their ways are hidden, and that the God they are serving is not a God, and the only God is the God introduced by the white man. This time, the religion of the colonialists was usually Christianity. And in many novels in Africa, we always see this phenomenon of the religious missionaries spearheading the mission for colonization. Therefore, in conclusion, we can say that the arguments raised in this paper, from the arrival of colonial masters in Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, foretold the destruction of the African primordial society, its beliefs, customs, and traditions, and the subsequent subjugation and oppression of the people. The novel chronicles some of the historical events that took place in Nigeria during the colonial period and their consequences on the nation as a whole. Before I go, I want to say that Desmond Tutu of South Africa once said that the white man came and introduced his religion. And as the Africans, let us pray with our eyes closed. When the Africans closed their eyes holding the Bible, by the time they opened their eyes, they had the Bible in their hands, while the white man had the land. So in another way, there's a proverb in Africa, they say the white man came with the Bible in one hand and the gun in the other. The Bible representing the means of penetration, brainwashing of the people, while the gun represents the subsequent usurping of the Africans' land. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sinui, for such beautiful and comprehensive research that you have shared with us today. And we are really thankful that you showed your willingness to share your knowledge with and expertise with all of us. Dear audience, like yesterday, we discussed some of the Indian myths and discussed about Indian mythology. And look, since today morning, we are learning, discussing, and knowing a lot about myths that are popular in other countries. Sinui ma'am has woven together all the three key terms which are in our conference: history, ethnicity, and myth, in one single work, that is Things Fall Apart, which he has discussed with all of us. So Jonathan sir has brought history and myth and literature together in the previous session. About language, Russia, he talked about. And look, Sinui ma'am has very beautifully talked about popular myths of Africa, Igbo myth, sorry. So we are really thankful to such speakers, such great speakers who have taken out time for us in giving us an enriching experience in these 2 days. So thank you so much, Sinui ma'am, for such beautiful deliberations.
You're welcome.
And I would again now request Professor Deepa Chakravarti to please thank Madam Sinui.
Appreciate Sinui Geraldine for her talk. Sinui madam, can we see you? Your camera is off. Okay, nice talking to you. In fact, this is your coming back. You did organize with us talk on Commonwealth literature, isn't it? This is the second time.
It is.
Yes, yes. So I found it very thoughtful, although the book Things Fall Apart is a much read and researched book. But the particular thing you talked about is the pre-colonial time, where myths were there. And after, there are new myths brought in or imported by the colonial masters, who are the white men.
Exactly.
Yes, a lot of pretension after, I mean, in the post-colonial phase, the white men coming with a missionary zeal, showing that they have come, it's white man burden, to civilize the other, right? Lot of lies,
Yes.
lot of lies. And this connect your talk with, deliberations of Professor Lockhart, Jonathan Lockhart, who talked about political language and the corruption. And you also talked about that after, during colonization, new myths came in, but these are lies and whitewashing, actually their evil wish of conquering the other. Nothing to civilize the other. Everyone is as civilized. And when you talk about the the pre-colonial myths, it's very, very interesting. In fact, they are more constructive than destructive. So if you allow me to tell, or maybe you can add 1 or 2 lines on that.
Come again.
I was talking about, you talked about the 2 phases, right? One in the pre-colonial phase, when the native, when the people of the land have their myths, and that created a feeling of nation and conglomeration who have the same beliefs, etc. But when the white men came, they brought in other myths, right? Which
Yes.
kind of was not, it's inimical to your own socio-cultural fabric.
Of course, yes. As I said, the white people were wise enough to introduce religion, as a spearheader of colonization. Because if they came otherwise, the people will not accept them. So they introduced, first of all, their religious myth. The Africans knew that they have a God. They have a God of fertility, the God of production, the God of fertility who will give children, give food to the farm, the gods of protection, and then they have the overall God. It's in Nigeria, they call him Chukwu. But in the Nigerian society where this novel is set, each individual has a personal God that they call a personal Chi, C-H-I, the personal Chi. And the white people came and said, you are worshiping carved wood. They do not have mouths. They cannot talk. And then one of these people argues and says, yes, it is carved from a tree. But the tree from which this God is carved represents God, because trees show that there is an omnipotent being. And the white man tells the Africans that their own religion is heathen, and that the only religion that is acceptable is the white man's religion that talks about the Almighty God. That is a myth, because the Africans also believe in a super God, a creator. The Muslims will call it Allah. And the Africans in Nigeria, they call him Chukwu. The God, the creator of the universe is Chukwu. And the Hindus may call you have Buddha. You know, the overall God. And each country, each part of the world has a name for that superior being. But the white man comes and dismantles this myth. And then the myths in the community, those that govern the community together. You see, when someone dies, from some mysterious actions, like committing suicide. Suicide already is like a curse to the land, to the family. Even in Cameroon today, if you commit suicide till today, in my community, in my village, in my tribe, no one just goes to take you down from wherever you have committed suicide. It is considered an abomination for a human being to take away his own life. And so they will have to perform certain rites before that person is brought down from the tree or from wherever he or she is hanging. But the white man comes and claims that he can defy that myth of such people who have committed suicide. He defies the myth. And there is one glaring thing, the myth about the evil forest. Even though the throwing away of the twins was wrong, that's just some light that the white man defies, the myth that is defied, and that one at least is positive because it helps the people. But some of the myths that the white people came and told the people, destroy the community. The evil forest, for example, becomes, if we go into that, becomes a kind of eco protection. Even though they dump these people who have died, that forest is never touched, and it remains an original forest, a natural forest where no one treads. It becomes a natural reserve. Let me go into some little explanation to say that in Africa, there are shrines where people do not venture into. And these shrines can only be visited. They are often in the thickest part of the forest. There you have rivers. No one goes there for hunting. No one goes there to wash clothes. No one goes there to carry out any activity. And you see that it's a kind of preserving the natural environment, a natural forest. But when the white man comes, the people say, okay, let's give them part of the evil forest. They get into the evil forest, they clear off everything, and in a few days, they set up their church. And that the clearing of that evil forest to set up the church for Christianity is an indication that the community has been penetrated to its core, and it can never be the same again.
Thank you, Sinvi. I mean, it's really, really very, very interesting. And the more we, learn about what happened to us, to our culture, to our civilization, we become enriched. And we are all one people in a way that we have been colonized. Africa, of course, Cameroon, colonized by so many times, in fact. So thank you, Sinvi, for joining us and for sparing your valuable time with us. Over to Dr. Gunjan.
Thank you very much.
Professor Hemendra Chandalia would like to discuss something with you. So over to you, sir. Is it working?
Yes.
Hello. Good morning, Dr. Geraldine.
Good morning, Professor.
This is Dr. Hemendra, and I'm listening to you a second time. Earlier, it was a conference organized by Rajasthan Association for Studies in English some 2 years back, in which you joined in the valedictory session with us.
Okay.
If you could recall, and your paper is already published in the journal that we produce. It's there on the internet as well. So that must have been conveyed to you. But today I would like to appreciate your presentation, and we share the same colonial history.
Others, please keep sitting. Sorry.
India,
Thank you very much.
we have been subjugated by the colonial forces the same way, and they came to both African countries, Cameroon and India, with, as you said, Bible in the hand, and later they gave it to the people here and took up gun to subjugate us. That
Exactly.
is the history of colonialism everywhere. And I would like to submit very humbly that today the forces of neo-colonialism are at work,
Yes.
and we have to fight back again as we fought against colonialism this time also. So thank you very much for joining this conference, and we look forward to more such meetings virtually. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Hubert. I actually appreciate your invitation. I always like to share knowledge. Knowledge shared is knowledge gains.
Thank you so much, Dr. Geraldine, for joining in and for your valuable time. We hope
Thank you
that
very much, ma'am.
we'll have some more collaborations in the future. Thank you so much to our dignitaries for joining in. So now we'll take a quick tea break for 15 minutes and we'll return promptly after that. Thank you so much, everyone.
Technical sessions will start.
Yes,
Thank you, ma'am.
so technical sessions are starting in various rooms, already begun in various rooms. So you may go there. They who are the paper presenters. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. Namaskar.